Right. My name is Dominic. I'm going to be chairing the panel. We also have Vyacheslav and Balázs judging this debate. I'm going to time your speeches. I'm going to show you the remaining time of your speeches. This is half a minute left. This is the end of your speech. If you keep on talking 30 seconds after the end of your speech, just keep on doing this, which is a clear signal for you to summarize your speech. Do you have any questions at this point? All right. Then I'd like to welcome the first affirmative speaker to present the affirmative case to the fourth round of MTT debate turn.
Oh, do I have to talk in it or not? Cool. Ladies and gentlemen, so this big emotion-driven crowd rumbles through the streets, destroying cars, making fire, shouting, stomping over people, robbing shops, killing people, killing policemen, basically creating chaos, creating insecurity. And all the worst thing is that all these people are fueled by emotion. They're fueled by a hashtag. This is the picture of a protest, of a riot, which we would like to maintain throughout the debate. We're ranking I'll tell you 4 things in my speech. Firstly, how riots are dangerous. Secondly, how social media leads to riots. Thirdly, how the state has the legitimacy to block social media. And fourthly, I'm going to talk why riots don't make a change in a Western democracy. So firstly, why riots are dangerous. Ladies and gentlemen, we believe that Facebook and other major social media are used to organize these protests, these riots. What happens is that, as I've told you, all these riots are driven by emotion. Those people aren't really there to make change. They're driven by emotion. They're driven by hashtag. They just really are sensational, temperament. And we believe that when they do this, when they do all this violence, this is very bad for other people. This can seriously harm these people, make injuries. This can even kill them. We believe that, secondly, this is very harmful toward their private property. Those people usually set cars on fire, set businesses on fire, throw rocks into windows, therefore destroy private property, which we believe is very bad. But the worst thing on these riots, ladies and gentlemen, is that they are very hard to control once they kind of start, because we believe that it's a very big emotion-driven crowd mob. They're basically in a big group, and police cannot harm them. So police cannot harm. They can only use tools which are very inefficient against this very violent crowd. Therefore, when a riot breaks down, it is very hard for the police to stop. It is very hard for them to make all these people calm down. Our second point: why social media leads to riots? And there are two sub-points in this argument, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, we're saying that it's very easy to start a riot within a social media realm, and secondly, that how easy it is to spread baseless information on the social media. So first, why is it easy to organize? Ladies and gentlemen, there are millions, lots of people on social media, all connected for different groups, for different circles, for different hashtags. Therefore they can spread the information really fast between each other. It's basically they're very active in their social media. They check it frequently. They contribute. They like to read. Secondly, those social media are unchecked and unregulated. What this means that everyone basically can spread anything, regardless of its truthness, regardless of its of its value. Everyone can spread anything. Therefore, this is an ideal place to do an incite, ideal place to kind of manipulate people, to kind of set a wildfire. Ladies and gentlemen, when protests in London were happening, there was basically a group of guys talking about protests. They started the London riots hashtag. They moved all thousands of people in the streets. They caused the fact that $1 million were destroyed within private property, and then lives were destroyed, just because social media is an ideal realm to do this incite, to kind of make people go to the streets. Secondly, why is it easy to spread baseless info? Ladies and gentlemen, once somebody on Twitter just announced that Steve Jobs died. This was not true because Steve Jobs was alive at that time. What happened is that the Apple sales dropped by 3%. Their value on the market dropped by 3%. This is a big amount of money. All those people were driven by fake information on social media. And you see that this is very effective. It works similarly to a wildfire. Our third point, ladies and gentlemen, why is state there to do this? We believe that the government, which was the government is there to protect people. It was elected in the first place in a liberal, in a Western democracy to protect these people. It comes out of its constitution. And what we believe that sometimes it has to protect people, yes, indeed, while taking their rights away. Let's say that in times of crisis, there is some curfew. For example, when there's war and when there's like a minefield, the government is taking the liberty of these people to walk, because they cannot just simply walk to the minefield, because they would harm themselves and they would harm other people. Therefore, in times of crisis, we are taking their rights away just to maintain their security, just to maintain their lives. It works very similar in this case. Therefore, we like get the legitimacy to like block the social media, so that people we're getting the legitimacy to block the social media so that people can organize riots, and so that then the riots can't make the big damage which I've talked about. And now let's move to my last point: why riots don't make a change. Ladies and gentlemen, we believe there are three branches of government, or like the government is kind of there are three branches, the system of checks and balances in the government. What happens is that the branches control their power. Therefore, it's like impossible for one branch to like kind of take over and like do something very bad for the people. We saw this within the Patriotic Act, when the judiciary branch stopped the legislative branch before doing something very, very stupid. Secondly, in a Western democracy, we have free media. Those free media are controlled and regulated. It is impossible to spread rumors, to spread bad, not truthful information in the social media. Therefore, it is impossible to kind of start moving these people based on the wrong fact, ladies and gentlemen. And this is And finally, there's a Congress to respond. If those people are not happy with something, and there are minorities which are not happy, they basically they have representatives which they can tell that they have Supreme Court. Legitimate Supreme Court approved gay marriages not a long time ago. Therefore, we see that a Western government cares about its people, gives them lots of opportunities to say what they think, to say what they care about, to kind of make a change. On the other hand, LA protests, LA riots, London riots only have worsened the relationships with their government. Legitimate, for all these reasons, for the fact that we want to calm the people down, spread the fake information spreading, I beg you to vote for the proposition.
One minute? Yep. One minute.
Sir.
There.
Hi, thank you for the great speech. So, the first question is, why do riots begin?
Why do riots begin?
Yeah.
Well, that's far too philosophical for me. I don't really know. Could you be more specific?
Oh, okay. Is it possible to know when a riot is about to start?
Oh, a riot. Oh, I thought you were talking about riots. So, a riot. We believe that a riot is very emotional, very sensational. Let's talk about Coney. The whole Coney thing was not true. All these people were so emotional, so sensational. They believed that they started doing a movement just because somebody through the internet, through Facebook and Twitter, influenced them emotionally, and they started to be very sensational, even though no Coney ever existed.
So how government can know about it? I mean, they will.
Like government can know about the riot when there are people in the streets being very violent, destroying things, shouting, killing other people.
Okay, thank you.
It's pretty obvious.
You said that the social media is uncontrollable and unchecked. What do you
We're
mean?
saying that like it's unregulated. Well, we're comparing social media and free media. Like it is like very likely to spread rumors within social media because nobody checks what their status is, and nobody cares like what kind of nobody tries to verify your information when you're writing statuses and tweets. Right, but like on the other hand, in the social media, what they're doing is that they are only want to release true information. Therefore, it is not possible for someone to spread rumors within people, just like they did with Steve Jobs, and it had like very bad consequences.
Okay, your third point was that the riots don't make any change. So, can you explain?
All right, so we're talking about like we're talking about like Western liberal or Western democracies, and what happens is like you have thousands of ways to make it change. Like you can talk to your representative, you can write a petition, you can go to Supreme Court, and we're talking about like how easy it is to make a change in a democratic way, and how ineffective it is to like make a change in the right way. We're talking about LA riots, London riots, which only worsened the relationship between the people and the government.
So is it easier to make? Is it effective to write some petition to the government?
Well, we believe that we had like moral mandates in the USA, and what happened that like after a few of these moral mandates, the government like the government start to care and actually like think about these things, because the politicians only get elected like if like the people like them. Therefore, it is within the interest of the politician to like do what their people like care about their problems and help them.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any questions.
Thanks.
Can I take a minute and a half, please?
Alright.
Thank you. The judge is ready. While the resolution may read Western democracies, they're not really the only ones that are affected by this motion. And because our opponents don't recognize the importance of the rest of the world in this resolution, we stand on the firmest negative of this round. Now, before moving on to my opponent's case, I'd like to read some of my own. Our first point is that Western democracies betray their foreign policy and set a negative precedent for all other nations when they block social media during riots. And now I have 3 points under this. Three reasons for this. The first is that upon realizing that democratic nations will censor and block internet access to their people whenever there is a perceived threat, it sets the standard for other non-democratic nations to abuse their power. Oppressive regimes will take it upon themselves and censor and oppress their people even further whenever that government feels as though a riot is going on, which can be absolutely arbitrary. Principally, Western democracies create the model for the world that other nations generally try to follow, and by affirming this motion, autocratic nations will follow suit. Practically, this is bad because it gives more unchecked power to the government and it makes Western democracies seem hypocritical. Now our second reason is that it hurts international relationships. Western democracies lose influence in non-democratic nations. China uses this hypocrisy as a gold mine, as they have historically done, and this negative precedent will allow them to continue to crack down on protesters and continue to censor its people because they see that Western democracies do the same under this resolution. Now our third reasoning is that there are countries that need riots and social media is a valid tool or a vital tool to do so. A perfect example of this is in Tunisia, in which riots helped fuel their revolution, turning them against their autocracy, and in which social media played a vital role. The Affirmative sets the precedent that quelling such riots in these countries is good, and that the government actually has the power and the right to do so. Now our second point for today's round is that this policy is actually counterproductive. Taking away civil liberties from people will spark even more riots because riots often occur when the people feel as though the government has been taking away their rights. This is clearly counterproductive because the Affirmative causes more riots and even more violence. For example, the London riots occurred as a protest for civil liberties and then it diverged into this massive violent protest. Who and what can draw the line between a protest and a riot? It's simply not possible to know when a riot is about to begin. My opponent even addressed this and conceded to this in cross-examination. Giving governments this power gives them a monopoly on the legitimacy of protests. How we protect the people is just as or even more important than the end result. For example, the NSA is trying to protect the US citizens by spying on them, but those ends don't justify the means, which are infringing upon the civil liberties of the people. The Occupy Wall Street, Washington, D.C., Los Angeles, etc. protests are an example that hits even more closely to this motion of governments monopolizing on the legitimacy of protests. They were legitimate, peaceful protests, but because the government didn't like what they stood for, the US government used pepper spray, police violence, and fire hoses on the people, inciting even more violence, hereby making it clearly counterproductive to the aim that the Affirmative stands for, which is protecting the people, simply because they can't draw the line between protests and riots, and they don't know when riots are about to start, meaning that they can't provide any kind of actual meaningful resolution by shutting down social media, since they're going to shut it down after the riot already begins. If it already begins, then this violence is already going to occur, versus actually finding a peaceful resolution that stops the riots before they even begin. Now let's move on to my opponent's cases. He starts his case by talking about how riots are dangerous and how they're hard to control once they begin. However, this is exactly the point that the negative is stating, that because they're hard to control when they begin, the affirmation isn't actually solving anything. They don't know when it's going to begin, so then the only way they're going to shut down social media is after this riot already starts. If this riot already starts and this violence is already ensuing, shutting down social media may not even do anything because they're fueled by emotion, as my opponent stated, because they're not, for example, doing anything supposedly logical. So he's actually advocating something that has no solvency in today's round. He doesn't solve for the problem. He's only shutting down social media after the riot already begins, after violence is already imparting on these people. Now his second point is that social media limits riots. And once again, this is actually completely not true, since he has already agreed that since we don't know when riots start, we can't stop social media before riot starts. We can only do it afterwards. So this actually shuts down this entire case. Now, furthermore, he completely contradicts himself when he states in his fourth contention that free media spreads and it can't spread wrong information, and when he states in his second contention that social media spreads unbased information. So what we see here is that this is contradictory, and thus these points don't actually stand. And when he's in his third contention, when he's talking about how states have legitimacy, and his fourth contention where riots aren't needed to make a difference, he neglects the fact that this resolution, albeit taking place in Western democracies, have a huge influence on the rest of the world that is not actually Western and is not liberal democracies. So what we see here is that by doing this, it sets a precedent that it's right for governments to have this power to shut down riots when they start, or shut down these rights, especially when countries such as Tunisia, where they need rights, these countries are going to follow suit in these Western democracies, and because of these reasons, because it sets a precedent for the rest of the world which is negative, we stand on the firmest of opposition and stay strong.
Can we take 30 seconds? Can we take 20 more seconds? These calculations.
Thank you for your speech. And I have a few questions. What does Poland start? Why does Poland start violence?
What was that question?
Why does Poland start violence?
Why did the police start violence?
Yeah.
Well, that is highly contendable, and for a lot of reasons, I believe that that's false in many cases. For example,
In which case you mean?
Well, to name it off the bat, what we see in like the Egyptian or Tunisian revolutions is that the police weren't necessarily
Are
inciting
you
violence;
sure
it was the
that
military.
this?
And furthermore, what we see here is that the police inciting violence is actually a reason to negate the resolution because
Okay.
it gives unchecked power to the government and it gives the power for police to abuse their power and incite violence upon the people.
Okay.
We shouldn't actually assume.
You said that we don't need to control the social media during if the right will happen. We don't need to like control it during the right if it's already happened. But can you say that what's the benefit of not controlling social media during right?
Yeah, so basically what I talked about was I said that the affirmative doesn't provide for any solvency
No, you
because
just-
exactly.
you just say
During
the benefit and
exactly
that's
the cross-examination we established that we don't know when riots actually start or we can't predict when riots start, meaning that the only time you can actually stop social media is after the riot and after the violence or after all of this emotion is already stirred up. Now what I stated in my second
But
contention
what's the
exactly
benefit of stopping
exactly
after
my
that?
my second contention talked about how when we take away these civil liberties it might actually even
Okay.
cause more
Okay,
riots.
thank
So
you,
we
thank you.
actually okay.
Do you feel how you feel yourself in social media? You feel you're free, or you're like not comfortable in social media?
I don't understand the question.
Like, do you agree with me that social media is a place for doing everything you want? You're free there.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily free. The freedom of expression sure may exist, but then we're still
Yeah.
we're still constrained
Freedom
by
of
social
expression. You mean that they will do whatever they want,
pressure. Not necessarily.
even they create crime or violence.
Well, the thing is that's not necessarily true.
Okay. And what do you think about the government? Does the government have responsibility to protect their citizens?
Right. I talked about how there's a difference.
No, just say me that have they got this responsibility to protect them?
How they protect it is different from the end result, meaning that the ends don't necessarily justify the means.
Okay, thank you. I done.
Thank you.
Can we take about 3 minutes? 3 minutes, okay.
minutes used.
Can we use another minute?
6 minutes used
6 minutes?
in total.
Okay. 30 more seconds.
Six minutes, 30 seconds used, which effectively leaves you at 1 minute and 30 seconds.
We should be a math whiz. Where's my timer? Can actually use this table because it's a bit easier. Oh, just as clarification, we could add new evidence, right, in the second speech. Okay, cool. 5 minute speech, yes, okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to be talking about 4 major issues. The first is it really hypocrisy and is it really set a precedent? Second is, do riots actually help revolutions and do they actually help or are they actually counterproductive, which they are? And third is the issue of counterproductivity, which he states. And the fourth is a contradiction, which he completely misunderstands. Now, the first, is it hypocrisy and does it set a precedent for all these other autocratic regimes? First of all, he says that it sets a standard for other nations because autocratic regimes apparently follow other nations. Why are they still autocratic? Because of the fact that they don't follow other nations. This is completely false because if they do follow other nations, if they do follow Western liberal democracies, then they would become Western liberal democracies. As we can see, they're obviously not doing that because they're constantly oppressing their own people. So this is in itself is completely false. Secondly, it actually sets a standard of violence for these people if we allow these riots to occur and chaos because the people will see, hey, these people are actually going against the government. They're using violence rather than actual peaceful debate. And instead of that, it'll set a standard for the people in those Western democracies to be chaotic, and also it'll set a standard for these autocratic nations to fight back more oppressively. Thirdly, it'll set a standard for bad relations between the people and government. Riots actually cause bad relations between the government because it destroys the trust between the people and government because they're like, hey, what's actually going on? And then they'll see that the government is going against them. It says bad relations. That's the point. So if riots do set bad relations, then it'll set a standard based on their point of view for these autocratic regimes to have bad relations between the people and the government, which is obviously not what we want. Second is the issue of do riots help revolution? And he talks about Tunisia, and he says this is linked to liberal democracies because it apparently affects other countries. First of all, he provides no link. I already provided to you how these autocratic nations do not follow suit to these liberal democracies. Secondly, it's completely different. It's a completely different circumstance because it is different from Western liberal democracies. Thirdly, these people are already censored. And fourthly, these riots are chaotic. They cause more killings, and they cause a lot more chaos, and they cause a lot more chaos and killings, which we obviously don't want. And we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if this is actually a positive thing or a negative thing. In fact, it's a negative thing because rather than having peaceful debate, all these peaceful protests, etc., we have these riots which cause chaos and violence. Now, the third thing is it counterproductive? He says that if we if we stop social media sites, then it will increase riots, and he talks about London riots and how it spread all over Europe, and he says that we don't know when it's going to begin. Okay, that's exactly the point. No, that's not exactly the point. First of all, there are other avenues that they could use that are more easily that don't involve violence as much. First of all, there's checks and balances in the government, like the legislative branch, the judicial branch, and all these other branches. In fact, we had the Patriot Act, which the legislative branch did, but then the judicial branch deemed it unconstitutional. And in fact, George Bush was elected twice because the government, the people saw that he was actually doing this, and they trusted him because they were able to. They understood these other checks and balances, meaning that if we stop these riots, if the people see that the government is stopping these riots through social media rather than violent protests, and in fact engaging in these violent protests where they're like killing these other people instead of actually blocking these social media sites, which is less violence, then it'll increase the trust between the people and the governments, because the people will say, hey, the government is doing the right thing because they're allowing us to do it more peacefully, more rationally, without all this emotional fuel and violence. The fourth thing is this contradiction that we supposedly have. He says that there's a contradiction because we talked about free media and social media. There's a complete difference. Free media, we're talking about newspapers, television broadcasts, they're all edited. They're all, there's regulations and all these things that make sure that there are no lies, compared to social media, which is unregulated. It's through the internet. It's extremely spread throughout all of the world, so that people can, if they hear something that they don't like, even if it's not valid or not, they could just go upon that and they could do whatever they want and be more violent. The fact of the matter, ladies and gentlemen, is that he barely even responds to any of our contentions. We say that social media leads to riots, and this is extremely bad because it spreads baseless information that doesn't even progress what they want to do as a whole, meaning that he provides no examples of how it actually progresses what they want to do. We have to look at these other avenues of peaceful protest, free media, all these other avenues, because it's extremely important to understand that riots do not cause any progress. Rather, they cause distrust between governments. It allows oppressive regimes to say, hey, look, there's distrust between these governments, and these governments, rather, instead of blocking social media to do it peacefully, they're actually engaging and fighting their own people, so it's allowing us to oppress our own people. And third, it's spreading baseless information, which will destroy the trust between the people and the government, which will also, I guess, set a precedent for these autocratic nations. Fourth, riots don't make a change, and governments obviously have a right to take away the so-called social media, because when it involves the national security of the country, that is their duty, and for these reasons I urge you to negate. Thank you. Can you pass me my water?
Kind of intimidated now. Ready? Alright. Do autocracies care about the people's opinion?
No.
Then how do peaceful protests work?
In autocracies?
Yeah.
There's a whole debate about it. It's really complicated.
So
autocracies differ in element, and like we don't know.
But if they don't care about the people's opinions, then how does anything like a peaceful protest have any bearing?
I mean, it differs per autocracy. I mean, there's like Napoleon. I guess if he's an autocratic person, he kind of cared about.
Let's actually look at something more recent,
Okay.
like the Arab Springs.
Okay.
Was there a peaceful protest that caused this, or was it something like mass demonstrations or riots?
It differs because we can't marginalize, or we can't generalize according to like the whole Arab Springs as a whole. We have to understand that it's really complicated. Like we even had a whole debate about if we could circumvent internet censorship because it will cause these revolutions, and we had a negative and affirmative side because one side said that it will cause chaos and it won't actually make progress, and another side said it would. So it's debatable, I guess.
Sure.
Because we debated the topic.
When you talk about how you tackled the point about it being counterproductive, you talked about how there's a balance of power, right?
I don't think I said that. Oh, what do you mean?
I mean like how George Bush got elected twice, because like there's a balance of powers within.
There's other avenues, and I talked about like the checks.
Right, sure. And how exactly does this combat the point that riots are going to be counterproductive? Because it seems like a slippery slope, and it feels like you didn't really make it.
I think you're. Okay, I said. Okay, so to the counterproductive point. Sure. You said riots are counterproductive because if the people see that they're suppressing their social media, then it will cause more riots, etc.
Sure.
And then we said that no, because if we actually use these other avenues, the people will increase trust because they see that the government, rather than engaging in violence against other people in riots,
yeah, exactly.
they're doing more.
But then we see that this is a more theoretical argument. But what about
no,
the
because
simple fact that
Bush got elected twice.
How is that? Yeah, how does that have?
He got elected.
How does that have any link to riots?
No, Bush got elected twice on the basis of his security policies. So because of that, because he was able to use these other avenues to divert this,
Yeah, but
this
what about the
conflict.
simple fact that a lot of these riots were caused because social media was taken away?
That doesn't make sense because you said that riots are caused by social media, and then how could
No,
riots
no,
be
you
caused by-
said that the riots were caused by social media.
Oh, wait, riots cause this. Yeah, so it doesn't make. Wait, explain more. I don't really
It's
understand.
fine. So when you actually talk about how there are different circumstances and riots cause more problems, like can you elaborate a little bit more on this?
Different circumstances.
Like how does it eliminate the trust between people and the government? And why is it a bad thing?
Oh, because if they, there's basically two parts. The first part is that if they see the government actually engaging in violent activity, so the reason why we're blocking social media is because it's like a civil way of stopping this violence, etc., right? And so instead of seeing these governments engaging in violent activity, if they see governments engaging in this violent activity against their own people, first of all, I guess it'll set a precedent for autocratic regimes, and secondly, it'll destroy the trust between the people and the government.
Great, thank you.
You have 5 minutes left.
Can I get two?
Sure. Sure. Two minutes 30 used.
Ready? Ready? Okay. I want to start my speech by saying that the biggest point in today's round is going to be the precedent that Western democracies set on the rest of the world. Non-liberal democracies will abuse the power and stop promoting beneficial movements such as those of the Arab Spring. This is huge because the Western democracies say that they are for democracy and human rights and power to the people. It cannot set a precedent that proves otherwise, such as set by shutting down social media and rights. Social media played a vital role in rights throughout the Arab Spring, and in order to promote these human rights movements, we must negate the resolution. We cannot make Western democracies out to be hypocrite because it stops the influence that these nations have upon the world. Our opponents misunderstood the point by saying that autocratic regimes do not follow Western democracies. Yes, they don't, but this doesn't change the fact that they respond to the negative policies and we set and the loopholes in this case. Actually, autocratic regimes do not follow the Western liberties, but they can use such thing against them. If you are putting pressure on autocratic regimes to stop blocking the media, then you go and yourself unblock it, the autocratic regime will simply use it against you and say, okay, if you do it, then why tell me not to do it? And actually the people in those autocratic regimes, the people who are being oppressed, look up to these nations as the model that will save their lives. Another thing they said that actually the United States, the Obama government spends $35 million per year to circumvent internet censorship during protests and riots. So by stopping and blocking the media, they are betraying their values. They are losing their accountability because by affirming this motion, they are setting against the values they are promoting. I want to say other thing that they talked about how stopping or blocking the using violent ways or using the police to stop riots is inefficient, and how blocking the media is more peaceful. If it wasn't efficient, if blocking the media was efficient, why did the UK government didn't use it? Why did the UK government stop the London riots by using water guns? Because simply, first, it will lead to more violence if you block the media. Second, it wouldn't be efficient. And let me say how. Because when you block the media when the riots are happening, more people will become angry because you are taking away the rights. Second of all, it wouldn't be efficient because the riots already started. And they admitted themselves it's not controllable. And they used an argument that people would be okay if the government violate their rights in order to protect them. Well, also people will be okay if the government loses some violence, not all of it. They're not killing people. They stopped the London riot by water guns. People will be okay if the government is using some violence, if you call it violence, to stop such riots. We are presenting an alternative. The government could use the alternative of sending more police, having more enforcing the law, instead of using this motion, which is blocking the media. You can just put more police out there and stop these rights without infringing the civil liberties. So simply, and the London riots happened and spreaded and were so violent because it happened in the suburbs where there is less police. So we are giving simply this alternative that would be simply more efficient, that will prevent the violence and will simply stop the riots without infringing civil liberties. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Can I?
Yes.
Hey, hey there, very nice speech. Do you remember the London protests? Like, do you like know what happened in there?
Yeah.
Cool. So for how long? How long were they?
I can't tell exactly how long.
All right, I'll tell you. It was 4 days, and the first day it was only in London. Hundreds of people came, and the last day was all over England. Thousands of people joined. If, let's say, we ban the social media on the first day and those people then aren't able to join, is our policy effective? Even though we cannot predict when riots happen.
Do you know that people could circumvent internet censorship?
I'm asking questions.
Yes,
I'm
people
demanding
can
answers.
circumvent internet censorship and still spread the word. But simply, the government
Alright,
cannot
so you're saying
know.
that in reality, the millions of these people would use fake proxies and fake IP addresses just to circumvent the internet censorship and then get to the information, even though.
I can't
even though it's
understand
not.
the question. Sorry.
So you're saying that those big amounts, those thousands of people, every single of them will use a fake proxy. Every single one of them is, technologically, educated enough to circumvent the internet. Every single one of them will access Twitter.
I didn't meet
It
them
depends. All right, you're talking about precedent, and you're justifying it by saying that, well, the oppressive regimes take Western democracies as a model. Could you name one example in which oppressive regimes take Western democracies as a model and want to act like Western democracies act?
We didn't. You misunderstood that. We said that.
Well, your first speaker explicitly say that oppressive regimes.
No, not the people in the oppressive regime look at the Western liberties as models, plus the autocratic regimes will use such an argument against them.
All right,
if you are stopping civil liberties, if you are oppressing people, then why are you telling me not to do it? They will lose their accountability.
No, but your argument says that, if you're talking about precedent, you're talking about precedent, that those oppressive regimes will block social media. Therefore, it's not about the people, but about the governments. Show me an example in which an oppressive government looks at a Western democracy and says, "Oh, we're going to do the same thing." Do they have elections? Do they have democracy? You have to show us an example.
You should understand that they won't look at you at the good points, but they will use the bad points against you. They will use the bad things against you. That's what we are saying.
All right.
And I would like to answer you to...
all right. No. I'm asking questions. Do they really care what do we do and what is legitimate? Because they'll be like, they don't really care. They don't need our verification to do something. Even in the status quo, even if we're not doing this, they are blocking the social media. They are blocking information. The whole president's argument.
And the Obama government is spending millions of dollars a year to circumvent internet censorship, to help people protest, to help people say what's happening in rights. And so they are actually contradicting the values they are promoting. If the Western liberties government are for speaking your minds, are for free social media, are for all of this, and then they go block it, they will lose their accountability. People won't believe them anymore. They are doing something that they are contradicting their own selves. They will lose all the power they have upon the world. Thank you.
Thanks.
Can we take the rest of it?
Yeah, let me figure out how much that is. 1 minute and a half.
Okay.
Your time is up.
Okay. If you can't read a list, then just take over there.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we are discussing this how the rights are completely counterproductive because it destroys the trust between the people and the government, and shows you that we should use violence which is fueled by the emotion and not rationality. There are major issues in this debate. The first is if it sets the precedence for the other like autocratic nations. They say that the autocratic government will use the blocking of the social media, but first of all, the autocratic regimes do not follow other democratic nations. If they did, then they would not be autocratic. So the instead of right and violence inside, we will give this government the ability to use violence against their own people, and set a precedence that we should not trust the government. The second issue is the actual policy. Even though we are debating the value, we will show you that even when it is during the right, social media acts like a fuel to make rights more violence. Logically, if we block like social media, this fuel will die down. So the third issue is the rights. The government has the duty to protect their citizens. So if its own citizen and its own people, rights are so very destructive because it will allow people to use the violence, kill people, steal, and it is not progressing that they want, which is also usually false because social media has no regulation and it's baseless. It is fueled by the anger and does nothing but it can usually harm people. Also, like if the autocracy sees the government allowing people to be harmed, they will like harm their people even more. Finally, the negative show no line in this debate to how the rights progress. All it does, it's harm. But also I want to add something that during the cross-examination, I asked them question that why should the right must not be regulated why must the social media must not be regulated during right? And we didn't hear the answer from that side, but we proved to you in this debate that why we should regulate this social media during right. And I'm done with this.
Negatives have 2.5 minutes.
Okay.
seconds. Your time is up.
Can you give me the stopwatches? Judges ready? Opponents? Okay. So, today's motion sounds like that the Western democracy have a right to block the social media during right. But as the negative team, we didn't agree with that, and we show you why in this main clash. In these three main clash points. First, the hypocrisy and precedent argument. This argument is vital because the affirmative side wants to promote national security and human rights, but they do not exact opposite is non-Western democracies while also changing nothing in the status quo. With the negative precedent that the affirmative said, the affirmative stopped the positive social media fueled revolutions that have occurred. Our opponents argue that this is a separate debate in itself, but it is impossible to deny that revolution caused positive change and that they would not have been possible if this policy was set in place for autocratic governments to abuse. The negative protects nation and support human rights more than the affirmative. China is such an example that users in US hypocrisy against them, such as the issues that has occurred in the regards to child labor and the controversy surrounding Target in a Walmart, showing that the negative policies is the Western democracies follow the exploited by oppressive nation, the further oppositive people. So we want to say that the second clash is that is it a hypocrisy because the principal Western democracies create the model for the world that other nations generally try to follow, and by affirming this resolution that autocratic nation will follow the suit because practically it's really bad because it gives more unchecked powers to the government and makes democracies hypocritical. So also they don't when the government don't know when protests become a riot because it's a big difference between the riot and between the protest. They can't tell when the peaceful protest is turning into the violent riot. So the government will end up censoring social media in many cases for nothing. This will have two dangerous impacts. First, riots will spread more because people will be angry that the government blocked the social media. It means that they took away their rights for nothing. So the second point is the government will get a monopoly on the legitimacy of protests, which will lead to abuse the power. So the other clash point that our opponents dance around the issue that of the counterproductivity by talking about the checks and balances as well as the other avenues that people can take, but this doesn't address the point that riots will be further fueled when the civil liberties are taken away by the government, which has been a reason to a riot in the first place, thus monopolizing that the legitimacy of the protest hurts nation because its grant government unchecked power. So the affirmative is thus the being contradictory, because they are actually showing that the balance of the powers that exist already in the status quo. So by all these clash points, I want to say that the Western democracies cannot have a right to block social media during the riot, because it will lead to the more bad consequences than we have, because it will be more worse, and we show you why by this all clash points. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your speeches. We will need some